The city of Samaria was in a desperate place. The army of Syria had camped outside the walls of the city for many days, and they had cut off all traffic in and out of the city, trying to get the people within the walls to surrender to them. Food supplies in Samaria became so sparse that people resorted to eating animal dung. Some had even stooped to cannibalism. Outside of the city gate was a small camp of men that neither the Samaritans nor the Syrians wanted anything to do with. There, in dingy huts and tents, 4 lepers, clothed in rags, lived out their days in hopeless isolation, surviving on the mercy of the people inside the city walls. Life was bad enough for these 4 leprous men before the Syrian siege. Back then, they had lived each day watching for some compassionate person to carry a basket of leftover fragments of food to a neutral spot, so that one of them could walk out, fetch the basket, and bring it back to their hut for all of them to share. But now that the Syrians had shut down Samaria, and the people inside the walls were enduring a famine, there were no leftover fragments of food. These 4 lepers, who used to live in fear of the thought of dying of their horrible disease, were now withering away from starvation. As the 4 lepers lay there in their little makeshift village, not far from the Syrian army camp, the smell of fresh meat cooking on Syrian campfires filled the air each night, and nearly drove these poor starving men out of their minds. Finally, one of the 4 lepers spoke up and said, "You know, I've been thinking, what do we have to lose by just walking over to the Syrian camp and asking them for something to eat?" Another said, "You're crazy. They'll kill us." The first guy said, I know, but we're dying anyway, right? I mean, we basically have 3 choices. 1, we knock on the city gate, and even if they let us in, they have no food, so we go in and die with them. 2, we sit here till we starve to death. Or 3, we go to the Syrian army, and they either kill us and we die quickly, or they show kindness and feed us. Why sit we here until we die? He was making sense, and soon they all agreed. After the sun went down, they would approach the Syrians. When the time came, they all walked nervously towards their camp. Still in the shadows, one of them shouts, "Hi! We're the lepers from the camp just down the road. You've probably seen us. We came to plead for mercy. Can you spare anything at all? Even just some leftover bread. If you throw it out to us, we'd be very grateful." He stopped talking, and the 4 of them waited for a voice to say, "Go away," or for an arrow to come flying through the air. But nothing. No response. No noise at all. He tried again. "Hello? Is anybody there?" Still nothing. "Should we just walk in? Are you nuts? You'll be dead for sure." They waited. Not a hint of life. Finally, he says, "I'm going in." He slowly makes his way into the Syrian camp, and fearfully the other 3 follow him. Everything looked as if it had been suddenly abandoned, like they had just been there 5 minutes ago and now they were gone. What these 4 men didn't know was that just before they had arrived, God had caused the Syrians to hear the sound of a huge approaching army, and it scared them so badly that they very suddenly up and left everything and ran for home. And the great wealth that they had already plundered from other countries earlier in their campaign was still lying around in their camp. Livestock, gold, silver, clothing, tools, weapons, and tons of food. These 4 men instantly went from being starving beggars to being feasting rich men. They entered the first tent they came to and sat down and gorged themselves on an all-they-could-eat buffet. Then they began to go from tent to tent, grabbing handfuls of food and clothes and bags of silver and gold, carrying it back to their camp, making trip after trip. This was all too good to be true. For the better part of the night, they took the stolen wealth of the Syrian army and made it their own. They plundered the plunderers. And when they had carried all they could carry, they hadn't even scratched the surface. There was so much more left back in the Syrian camp. They collapsed in their little camp, worn out, happy, and stuffed. They just laid there, laughing at their incredibly good fortune. When at last their celebration died down, and the only sound was the crackling of the fire. One of the men spoke up and said, "Boys, we do not well." Another one spoke up and said, "I don't know, I'm doing pretty good." No. The first man began to tear up. We all have family and friends inside those city gates, and they're starving like we were. We've got to let them know. They all agreed. They left their place and went and knocked on the city gate to let them know about the great wealth that lay outside. And by the end of that next day, the famine in Samaria was over. Christian, we do not well if while we rejoice in God's great blessings, we don't pass the word to those still starving in sin. Stay the course.